Alright, get ready. This video is all about web application attacks. Web applications connect to public networks, exposing them to threats that can compromise data confidentiality and integrity. Knowing how these attacks work helps you to detect, prevent, and respond effectively. When we say application attack, we're talking about exploiting weaknesses in operating systems or application software. There are two common scenarios. You have compromising host. This is where you are exploiting operating system vulnerabilities, using malicious attachments or browser flaws to gain a foothold in the network. And then you have targeting web applications directly. This is where you're gaining control of a website to steal data or pivot deeper into the organization. Indicators of application attacks include frequent application crashes or errors, or you can see unusual CPU, memory, or network usage. By the way, these signs aren't always malicious, but they're worth investigating. Most attackers want to run their code on a compromised network. In order to do so, it will require elevated privileges. The ability to execute any command they choose is known as arbitrary code execution. There are two types of privilege escalation you should be aware of. You have vertical escalation. This is where you're gaining higher privileges, like moving from admin to system level. And then you have horizontal escalation. This is where you're accessing another user's data or permission without increasing privilege level. Privilege escalation often leave audit log trails and can trigger security alerts. Alright, next attack I want to talk about is a popular one, buffer overflow. When a program runs, it sets aside specific areas in memory called buffers. These buffers are used to temporarily hold data, like user input or file content. Think of a buffer as a container with a set size. For example, if a program expects a user to enter up to 20 characters, it creates a buffer large enough for those 20 characters. If someone sends more data than the buffer can hold, and the program doesn't check the length, the extra data spills over into adjacent memory areas. This is known as the buffer overflow. And attackers can exploit this to overwrite important parts of memory, potentially inserting and running their own malicious code. Alright, next attack I want to talk about are replay attacks. Before I explain replay attacks, I first need you to understand session tokens. Session tokens are unique identifiers that a web server gives to your browser after you log in. They act like a temporary ID card, letting the server know who you are for each request without requiring you to re-enter your username and password every time you click a new page. These tokens are usually stored in cookies or local storage and are sent with each request to maintain your authenticated session securely. In replay attacks, attackers capture or guess session tokens. They can do this by sniffing or using malware or cross-site scripting, and then they reuse them to hijack sessions. If tokens are predictable, attackers can guess future tokens to establish authorized sessions. Alright, let's move on to the next attack. Forgery attacks. Unlike replay attacks, forgery attacks trick a system into performing actions without user consent. Here are two common types. You have cross-site request forgery, CSRF. With CSRF, attackers exploit trusted sessions by getting a user's browser to send unauthorized requests, like changing password, while the user is logged in. This is also called a confused deputy attack. And then you have your server-side request forgery, SSRF. This makes a server send requests to other internal services. Attackers exploit weak input validation to force public servers to access backend systems they shouldn't reach. SSRF is dangerous because it uses the server's privileges, and that often have access to sensitive internal resources. Alright, that's all the attacks we're going to talk about. Here's a recap. We learned web applications are exposed to attacks like replay, forgery, and privilege escalations. We learned privilege escalations let attackers gain unauthorized control. We also learned about buffer overflow and how it can run malicious code by overriding memory areas. We learned about replay attacks and how it reuses captured tokens to hijack sessions. And we learned about CSRF and SSRF. They exploit trusted sessions to perform action without user consent. See you in the next one.